On November 8, 1892, Grover Cleveland became the first and only president in U.S. history to win 2 non-consecutive terms in office. He had campaigned on a platform to reduce the McKinley tariff, and the people had responded overwhelmingly, electing him to a return engagement by a landslide. Number 24, Grover Cleveland, Democrat, 1893 to 1897, 55 years old, from New York. Cleveland's return to the presidency was triumphant. With his young wife Frances and their new daughter, baby Ruth, the Clevelands were more popular than ever. Unfortunately, an economic disaster was about to strike. A month after Cleveland regained the office, the panic of 1893 hit. The great industrial bubble of the 19th century had burst.
The 1890s saw the worst economic depression in American history until that point. Starting in 1893, tens of thousands of people were thrown out of work, and this at a time when there was essentially no social safety net.
In protest, an army of the unemployed marched on Washington, the first of its kind.
When they arrived in Washington, Cleveland had them arrested for trespassing on the grounds of the Capitol.
Grover Cleveland might well feel compassion for the poor and those in want, but he didn't think it was the national government's responsibility to provide jobs in a depression or help of any kind. He was not a cruel man or an uncompassionate man. I think any other president in the 1890s would have behaved the way he did.
Complicating matters was the debate over the nation's monetary system. Eastern industrialists insisted on gold, the supply of which they controlled. In opposition, farmers, Westerners, and a grassroots party known as the Populists supported bimetallism, a currency system which allowed silver and gold. The monetary debate was the central political issue of the 1890s, representative of a deeper war over opposing beliefs on public policy, finance, and the equitable distribution of wealth. Cleveland opposed bimetallism, declaring that the solidity of the gold standard would end the Depression. This made Cleveland look like a pawn of the industrialists, and suddenly his popularity among the masses faded.
I find him in many ways a fascinating figure and an admirable figure. I just wish he had only been elected to one term. I think the second term was a great misfortune for him and for the country.
Unable to heal the nation's economic crisis, and out of touch with the growing political movement for government reform, Cleveland was dropped from the Democratic ticket in the election of 1896. When Grover Cleveland exited the White House for the final time, he left a legacy as the last of the laid-back 19th century style presidents. He had hoped to passively steer the ship of state into the future by maintaining the status quo. Instead, he found himself unable to deal with the dynamic changes that were pushing the nation very quickly into the 20th century. Leaving Cleveland behind were 2 vibrant presidential candidates, Democrat William Jennings Bryan, who pleaded the case of the common man, and William McKinley, a Republican backed by big money. In 1896, big money